Peter, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday evening and being here with us.
I'm glad to, Pat.
One thing before we got a ton of questions sent in, and one thing before we do move on with the message, with this binary message, has anybody actually, it talks about locations and different things. Has anybody actually gone out and kind of tried to, if you will, call it, tied it out to some of these locations that this message points out to? Are they interesting places, or did something happen there?
Yeah, the locations vary widely, from Sedona, Arizona, to a mythical sunken island off the coast of Ireland, to some mystically oriented locations in Asia. I can't answer that question. That's something that Jim, that those questions need to be directed toward him or folks who are adherents of his story. Again, as I said in the first half of the program, I have a number of problems with his account, which now his co-author, John Burroughs, has made very clear he has as well. And one of them is in their book with Nick Pope, and I'm paraphrasing ever so slightly here. Jim says, how could I, 24 hours after the event happened, sit in my room and copy out into my notebook literally thousands of ones and zeros constituting a binary code and remember everything in order? Well, I have no idea how he could do that. And again, John says that Jim had not even told him about this till almost 30 years after it happened, that he never saw him touch the craft, as is alleged, and their former deputy base commander, Charles I. Hall, who has done ever so many documentaries with Jim and John, or appeared with them at various events, now says that he saw Jim's notebook many times over the years, but never saw any of these pages of ones and zeros. So that is a question best taken up with Jim Penniston.
Gotcha. You want to take a call?
I'd be delighted to.
All right. Caller, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk. You're on with Peter Robbins.
Hey, Pat. How are you? This is Bill in New York. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Good.
Peter, I have a question. I live in upstate New York as well. I live in the Hudson Valley, not far from the Pine Bush area.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm doing some sky watching, and I've been catching some really interesting objects in my skies.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you is, are you aware of the rise in sightings in New York State in general?
Oh, yes, I am.
Because the object I caught was, it looked round. It was at sky level. It seemed to be going across the sky. And it looked to be spinning. And I reported it, to MUFON and to New Fork. And they're as puzzled as I am as to what this object could be.
Yes.
And personally, I've been doing the sky watching for, I'd say, about close to a year now.
Yeah.
And I know what a satellite looks like, a meteor, a space junk, etc.
Yeah.
And this object does not fit any of those criteria or descriptions. So I'm wondering, do you think that maybe most of the objects that we're capturing could be something that we developed by maybe back engineering technology that we discovered? I mean, Peter, I cannot put a finger on what I'm watching in the skies over here.
Well, first, the way you laid out your thoughts right there, your approach to this and your logical thinking are to be applauded. It's so easy to be overwhelmed in a very real, visceral way by looking up and seeing something that is so exciting and so mysterious. First, we should share with listeners that the small town that you refer to in upstate New York, Pine Bush, which I know a little bit, has statistically the highest incidence of corroborated sightings of any community in New York State. for reasons we can only guess at. There are places around the world that can claim the same title. Bonnybridge, a small town in Scotland, has much the same statistical phenomena surrounding it. Also, the beautiful Hudson River Valley there is no stranger to anomalous craft, and best known, of course, from 84, 83 or so, the triangles which inundated the valley there, and which quite a number of people filmed with video back then. Now, the big question, of course, is what you are seeing representative of advanced technology from who knows where, coming and going from our Earth with impunity, or indeed, is it representative of our technology, highly secured, classified, advanced, but things that we have developed on our own, or with the aid of, as people say, back engineering, anomalous craft from parts unknown? And the answer to that is I don't know. And I think anybody that tells you, well, it's definitively us or it's definitively them, I would take with a grain of salt. We're talking about a genuine unknown, or that wonderful line attributed to the David Ferry character in JFK as an enigma wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in a mystery, or words to that effect. We don't know. And at this point, I feel that a lot of truly mysterious activity in the sky may well be us. We have things up there that regular civilians like us can only imagine. At the same time, to quote my friend and colleague Stanton Friedman, the question is not, are all UFOs machines of advanced, technology that come and go from parts unknown? The question is, has one ever been? And the answer to that is an overwhelming yes. We don't know what you've been seeing, but the smart money is that it is either them or us with very advanced aircraft that is so highly classified and so radical in the ways that they appear or they move or they work, that they might as well be from out there, if you know what I mean.
It's funny, Peter. I am very careful because when I post the videos up on YouTube, I'm very careful when I do my narration to say this is an unknown object. I am not saying that it's alien in origin, And I also agree with your. It's all about percentages. Even if 1 out of 100 is something that is truly from,
it's the biggest story of humankind in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And I don't mean to interrupt, but Peter, back in '95 when I was living in the Bronx, and I know you're from Manhattan, I believe.
Yeah.
I was looking out my window and I was looking toward Manhattan, and it was the night they had Pocahontas. This was in '95, and it was the night they were showing Pocahontas in Central Park, and there was a thunderstorm that night. And at about 11 p.m., they were shooting off the fireworks at the end of the movie, and I seen this triangular or boomerang craft go right over my building. It had 5 bluish-white orbs. So, okay, I reported it to Newfork at the time. Peter Davenport got back to me a few days later and said,
sure.
You were not the only one that's seen this. Many people seen it from New York City up the Hudson River all the way to Canada. So even in New York City, where it's a populated, densely populated area, you can see these things. You can be anywhere and have these kind of sightings.
It's very important that you bring up that fact, because one of the mythologies of UFO-related activity is that the phenomena is only observed in rural areas by folks with very modest educations, to be kind, or in third world countries by frightened mystical natives. And no, demographically, the UFO phenomena are observed from very large cities. My God, Mexico City, the inundation they got in 1999 and 2000 and since, and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of credible videos that have come out of that city of 20 million, forget about Manhattan or New York City. No, again, we're dealing with an unknown here, but it does happen over big cities as well as rural areas, and a very famous New York example is the sighting that John Lennon had from May Pang's apartment, not far from where I used to live in the East 40s, up one morning very early, out on the balcony looking at the East River as a disc-shaped craft just clicked along nice as you please early in the morning over the river heading south. These things happen, and I very much appreciate the approach that you're taking. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Peter. And Peter, it is
those
an honor
videos.
and a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you. And you have a great night. And Pat,
yes.
I'll be talking to you soon.
Hey,
have
Bill,
a great night.
You know what?
Yes.
Forget about it.
Like us people in New York City would say.
That's right, exactly.
Have a great night, guys.
Take care.
Enjoying the show.
You too, Bill.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's, I was talking to Bill, we email back and forth quite a bit. Here in Utah, we had a sighting, the news stations picked up something at 2, 3, 4, I think it was at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning a couple nights ago, that has kind of hit the internet and gone all over. Some are discounting it as saying it was a meteor. Others are saying that it was some sort of craft that was flying and then a fireball shot at it. There's a ton of video out there. Bill and Eric are two of our dedicated listeners who have set up high definition cameras. It have been doing sky watching, of course, when the skies are clear. But this thing that was captured on the news here, and it was on Fox and ABC and all the big affiliates here in Salt Lake City, which is very rare. I think just so many people caught this thing.
Yeah.
Very similar to what they're catching in New York State.
Yeah.
These big puffy things, these white dots that are flying across the sky. It seems like this is starting to. It seems like the UFO. It's starting to pick up again, is what I guess I'm trying to say. Where more sightings are becoming more common now. It seemed like it died out for a while, but it seems like there's activity again.
Yeah, I've observed over the decades, and in studying the statistics available to us, either through the National Center, UFO Reporting Center that is so ably run by Peter Davenport in the Northwest, that we go through periods of time where either there are fewer unknowns aloft, or that there is more of a reticence to report them based on the ridicule that people associate with the subject or being associated with it. That is one of the most fascinating areas of study for me, how the subject initially got caught up with ridicule being used as the most brilliant weapon to make most folks not want to be associated with the subject, when in reality, when you think about it, if I said, let's say I was your neighbor in some suburb of Salt Lake City, and we ran into each other on the street, and I said, hey, Pat, I saw the most interesting thing in the sky this afternoon or last night or whenever. It didn't conform to any kind of machine I had ever seen. It wasn't a helicopter or a plane. It did the damnedest things. It maneuvered around like crazy. I could see that it was a genuine object and not some kind of illusion. Aerodynamically, I just can't explain it. It seemed to violate all the laws of, flight. And isn't that the darndest thing? And you'd say, yeah, I wonder what it was. As opposed to the conditioning that we Americans have been so brilliantly subjected to since the summer of 1947, where if I said that to another person, they'd look at me and they'd say, I wonder what's wrong with Peter. Is he mentally ill? Has he had some kind of breakdown? Does he want to feel special? Does he want to fool me? Does he want to be on the Oprah show? Does he want to, she doesn't have a show anymore. Does he want to be famous?
Well, you know,
Is
she's
he
an
a
alien
prankster?
too.
Or instead of, gee, yeah, I wonder what that was.
She's an alien too, Peter. She's been portrayed in a lot of movies.
Who knows?
No, I totally, I'm with you 1,000%. It is interesting how the media, I think, is taking a little different view at it.
Yes.
It was laughed off not that long ago, and now, again, I think with technology, people are able to get security systems for their homes. I think there are more people skywatching, doing what Bill's doing. It's kind of hard to dispute some of this stuff.
Yeah. It's true. I think also more and more people care less and less what other people may think about their attitude toward the subject of UFOs and its implications. Now, don't get me wrong here. It's not like there's some mass movement. It changes 1, 2, 7, 9 people at a time. And it often is because they have had their own sighting, had an experience, or had something related to them by somebody who they trust and whose word they take, or because they're particularly open-minded and are tired of, holding their opinions in check because other people are so concerned about this ridicule factor.
Right. People want to know the truth.
I think more and more, and that they're willing to express that. And it's something that I see at every UFO conference I speak at or help to organize. There are always a growing percentage of folks who are at their first event. And overall, and I very much like to chat with these people when I can, especially if I know that it really is their first conference or lecture on the subject, to see how surprised they are that they showed up at an event where they thought folks might have been wrapped in aluminum foil to keep out the gamma rays and, acting in disturbing, strange ways, but in fact are just like them, except that they take the subject seriously and have some knowledge of it.
We got a lot of questions sent in for you, and I want to get to them to definitely respect all the listeners.
Fire away.
But I've got a question for you. I know that you go and give talks all over the world on this subject. I did see a program the other day on Netflix. I think it's been it had kind of a little older feel to it, but it's a current film called Miracle Men. About about different events in ufology that have happened. Kind of makes some people out to look like they're crazy. So many interesting stories. But a question I had for you, and one of our listeners sent in, is with all these different, we always get into this us and them, the government and us. Like you said, the people with the tinfoil hats. Do you feel that, I don't want to use the word infiltration by any means, but do you feel that sometimes in your years of going to these different events, these different symposiums, what have you, that maybe there could be, let's call it official type people that meander in or blend in to see if somebody is seeing something and if there's some credibility to it?
Yeah. Well, when I first started in this work, I thought that taking that point of view was extremely theatrical and self-dramatizing and, people building themselves up to be secret agents and, seeing spies behind every tree and everything. Over the years, though, I've come to feel that it's naive to think that there aren't individuals that monitor these events and keep tabs on leading folks in the field and read the books and stay very aware of what is being put forward in the blogosphere and now online relative to the subject. And nothing would surprise me less than to learn that, gee whiz, agents of this agency or that agency had shown up at this event. It just makes sense that it's a very inexpensive way to keep an ear to the ground in this research community, knowing, of course, that it is still seen as an outsider subject, but at the same time that if anybody's listening, they damn well want to be kept appraised of what it is, and you don't have to spend much money in terms of a government budget to send somebody or a couple or what have you to a UFO conference to mix with the folks and write a report and get it back to whomever. Not a big deal.
So you kind of feel that maybe you've seen that a little bit.
Yeah, to a degree. I've had a few things happen to me in my career that indicate to me that a very specific interest has been taken in my work at certain times in my development that I'm aware of, or at times when things that I was involved in posed a potential embarrassment to offices or agencies on this or the other side of the Atlantic. And I expect that would be the case at this point. I don't think it's overdramatic. And, if I was them, it's certainly what I would be doing to keep tabs on what's going on in the UFO research community.
Well, people that gather information and are digging into things tend to be there because I think it's a place they can go and be comfortable and converse.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't have to worry about it.
That's right.
Let's get to a few of the listeners' questions.
Yes.
One of them is, what are Peter's thoughts on Alan Godfrey?
Oh, yes. Alan Godfrey was a British police officer. He may have even been a detective, I'm not sure, who was involved in a very important UFO incident right before Rendlesham Forest. I think it happened about a month before in November in beautiful Yorkshire, England, as opposed to beautiful Suffolk, England. And Alan, it was actually a UFO incident superimposed on a murder investigation. And Alan may well have been abducted, and not by terrestrial abductors, but by them in the course of this investigation. I studied it for quite a long time, every piece of information I could get on it, and Britain has become kind of a second home to me because of my years of coming and going from there. In fact, when I was there in August last, I think it was my 25th trip over, but I have met Alan. I have spent time with him. He is absolutely as credible an individual as Travis Walton or anyone I've ever met in the work who had everything to lose by going forward with his account and nothing to gain, and yet did it anyway. And I have tremendous respect for him and take his case very seriously.
Very, very interesting. Another question is, what does Peter think about the Linda Cortiel case, the famous Bud Hopkins case? Is that the Brooklyn abduction?
It is. It is. When Linda first wrote to Bud in the spring of 1989, I had been working as Bud's assistant for years at that point, and I was the person who first read that letter and brought it to Bud's attention. I met Linda later that year, and for the next 6 years, and that book witnessed the true story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO abductions. I worked with Bud literally on a weekly basis on that case. I got to know Linda very well. She remains one of my closest friends. I saw her last month. I think the world of her, and I think it's one of the most, it may well be the most important, multiply witnessed UFO abduction event that we have ever documented. I think it's Bud's finest work as an investigative writer. It's an incredibly complex case that people have slagged off because, it just couldn't be that way. Well, guess what? It was. And it's a book you can pick up a used copy of online for a couple of bucks. It's one that should be in every UFO-related library. Linda herself is an extraordinarily honest, decent person of, for me, high character. she and my late sister Helen used to be very close friends, and she is somebody I also, like Alan Godfrey, have tremendous admiration and respect for. But I think that is one of the most important and well-documented UFO events in the literature, no question.
Now, I have, there's so many these I don't want to call them stories, but these events, there's so many of them. Is this the one, Peter, that I believe, I could be wrong, is this the one where a bunch of people saw essentially a UFO fly right up to an apartment-type building?
Better. Well, they observed, this is lower Manhattan, let's remember, even though it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and many people observed this. I think 22 of them contacted Bud Hopkins over the time that followed with detailed letters of what they observed, and many of them including drawings that from where they drew them. And being a trained artist, working with a trained artist, we marveled at the detail and the precision of these drawings of people trying to do their best work, and literally all of them showing the same color schematics, the same size and shape craft, but seeing it literally from roughly 360-degree angles from wherever they happened to be at 2 or so in the morning. And they observed nothing less than a huge glowing disc shape hanging just over and slightly offset from a 12-story building, an apartment building down near the Brooklyn Bridge entrance, near our South Street seaport. And many of them were at the angle where they were able to observe this woman in her nightgown, kind of curled up in a fetal position, coming right through the plate glass window of her bedroom, along with several of these little beings, and taken up into this craft. And most of them, writing to Bud with total sense of incredulity, said, I could only assume I was watching a movie being made, but how did they generate these amazing special effects? But yes, this is that case.
It is, and I've read a lot of different things about it.
You should pick up the book. It's called, again, Witnessed, The True Story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO Abductions. You can find it online for a couple of bucks used. It's a must-read and brilliantly written and researched.
Yeah. Hint, hint, maybe you and her need to come on and do a program with us.
Mm-hmm.
Another question for you is, could ETs have specific interest with persons with talents in the arts, music, due to their creative and imaginative minds? And I will also kind of, another ufologist, which I'm sure you know, is Grant Cameron. Mm-hmm. We've had Grant in the studio a couple of times, listened to him give many different talks. He's kind of changed his research pattern into different things, and he's been talking about this, about music and the arts, and could some of these famous musicians and artists have been introduced at a different time to something that influenced their life?
I can only respond to that by saying I guess it's possible.
Okay.
I have no evidence that leads me to deduce this is the case or this isn't the case. I think this is an area where a certain random aspect comes into play. You can be a very talented person, have a UFO-related experience, and make a decision based on that about the direction you want to take your talent in. Somebody else might set up a counter argument that they have influenced you to move in a certain direction. I think it's an exercise in futility to argue that it is definitively one or the other. For me, this is one of those questions that we cannot know the answer to. We can only make our best deductive, educated guesses and choose to believe what we are most comfortable with, or what fits our philosophy, or what have you.
Interesting. Another question is, Bill sent this one. It said, with all the national security issues that we face today, Has there been more emphasis on the cases involving UFOs or unknown craft anomalies that have occurred at nuclear storage facilities, plants, and missile silos? And I think probably a second part of that question is I sometimes, while I think a lot of us don't want to say it, the threat of nuclear detonation is probably more possible and probable today than it has been since the Cuban Missile Crisis of years past.
Well, very important and very serious question, to be sure. We do know from a considerable amount, and for those who have never seen this kind of stuff, a surprisingly large amount of properly declassified military and intelligence community documents related to the subject of UFOs and nukes, some of which is included in Robert Hastings' UFOs and Nukes, his book, I think published in 2008, that we know for a fact that there has been very serious official interest and documentation in this particular subject. Well, certainly going back to the 1940s. I've got documents in my document library relative to UFO incursions at early nuclear facilities. And some feel, and I think with good cause, that the reason that Roswell was our first documented UFO-related major event is because at the time, in the summer of 1947, the world had only one single nuclear strike force, and that was the 509th Air Command Division that was located at the Roswell Army Airfield outside of a then fairly modest-sized town in New Mexico, which is now a name that people around the world know. Whether or not, with the fall of the Cold War and with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989-1990, although some welcomed it, as a moment when the world moved into a better place, we lost the extraordinary chess game of mad, mutually assured destruction that kept us and the Soviets and the other smaller country that are players from pulling the pin on any of these things or launching. That the madness of actually deploying these weapons outweighed the pushes toward doing it. We now potentially have nuclear weapons in the hands of stateless terrorists, many of whom are governed by extremely extreme views and who don't think that much of death. Not a good situation. I am pleased to say that the subject of UFOs and nukes was nothing I embraced to start with. It seemed pretty far-fetched and science fiction-y, except that it is true. They have a serious interest statistically in our relationship with nuclear energy, and for reasons that any sane person should be able to appreciate. Also, I am not aware of any nuclear UFO events where UFOs were involved hypothetically in triggering or attempting to trigger or accidentally triggering or attempting to trigger a nuclear detonation. It always seems to be the opposite. They upset the very complex mechanisms of these devices and adversely affect the ordnance, in Charles Halt's words. A guest that you might want to have on at some point in the future, who has a wonderful new book out right now, is Robert Salas. Bob is a former Air Force captain who, when he was a young officer, was involved in the famous Maelstrom Air Force Base UFO nuclear event in the 1960s. And he had, I think, 8 or 9 intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear weapons on them under his command. And while he listened, while he heard reports from the surface of these craft coming in over Malmstrom Air Force Base, he watched on his console his missiles blinking out one after the other, out of commission. And it could only be deduced that the reason had to do with these unknowns that had come in over the base. In a way, that's not bad news. It would be a lot worse if it were the other way around and they were interested in triggering these devices instead of neutralizing them.
Right, right. You want to take another call?
Without question.
All right. Caller, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk. You're on with Peter Robbins.
Yes. Is that me?
That's you.
There is a thing called the Pennsylvania experiment. Can you comment on that at all?
Do you mean the Philadelphia experiment?
The Philadelphia experiment, yes.
Right.
I'll hang up and listen to you on the air. Thank you.
Thanks, Eagle.
Yes, you bet. The Philadelphia experiment is a strong tenet of UFO myth, legend, and lore that purports to have employed advanced technology to make a World War II destroyer, and this dates back to the earlier 1940s during World War II, invisible. And in the course of making it invisible, creating some very terrible situations for the men who were deployed to that ship, and that some of them literally were stuck, their molecules were stuck in with parts of the physical ship, that some of them died, some of them went crazy. There is just enough real information to keep a lot of people going on this. For me, I've never seen anything in the way of real hard proof or evidence, not that it would be easy to come by, that makes me believe that it happened. Not, and I could be wrong about this, but for me it is an abiding legend and myth that someday maybe some researchers will be able to establish as factual beyond a reasonable doubt. Until then, I am very cautious about taking it seriously. A pretty good science fiction movie was made on it some years back, and it's a perfect example of that area in UFO studies, even indirectly, because the experiment did not involve UFOs per se, where don't mix what you believe or what you long for or what you think may be true with what you can establish empirically as fact.
Very true. Very true. What do another question that came in for you, Peter, is what do you think of Plum Island?
Plum Island is an island off the eastern coast of Long Island, where I came of age. That's that long island, about 120 miles long, that runs horizontally out from Manhattan. And it is a location, and I think that's either that or it's, off the coast of Massachusetts. Now I'll have to double check that. But it is an area which has a very kind of dark history of being used to quarantine people in communicable disease times and incidents, which also has an association with laboratories that do work on some very frightening toxins and possible bioweapons. It's never been a specialty area of research for me, so I'm not the best person to comment on it beyond what I've said. It's definitely a place I'm fine about not visiting, though. I'm real clear about that.
Interesting. A lot of so many places, Peter. So many locations out there that so many things have happened. You know, it's just amazing, and it's so widespread.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
What's a question that came in, and one that I had for you? What do you think is you talked about the different things that have happened in the interest level that you've had in them. Is there anything on the horizon that you want to delve into next and take a look at? Is there something that's out there that you think needs to be kind of dug through, if you will, a little bit?
Well, there's plenty. There's certainly plenty. For me, I see part of my role in this work not in trying to make contact with other intelligences or vector UFOs down to the ground. I see some of the best work that I can do as far more mundane and lackadaisical, in that, for me, getting people through that first doorway into kind of a climate where they can take a breath and say, okay, there may well be something to this. I'm now in a situation where I've heard my first lecture, or I've watched a really good documentary program, or I've read a book that's impressed me, or I've gone online and heard some lectures on YouTube. I have just finished developing a whole area of study and a conference paper. I might not even be giving this year or next year, but I certainly will at some point, on the origins of the ridicule factor. I like to locate certain aspects of my work in post-war history and ground it in real events that, Mr. and Mrs. Normal American can relate to some degree, rather than, shock and awe and try to impress people with, strange allegations. I think that there are going to be more developments coming up in this very important British event over the next year, the Rendlesham Forest event. There may well be more developments in the whole story and the implications of UFO-related abductions. These are all areas I'm trying to stay particularly sensitive to. Also, for me, over the past dozen years or so, besides researching cases, investigating allegations, I've become more and more involved in working with certain communities and municipalities and towns and cities which have a notable UFO event in their past, which often pulls the population in two directions, whether it's Roswell, New Mexico, or Exeter, New Hampshire, or McMinnville, Oregon, or Pine Bush, New York, where some of the local citizens may say, we should take pride in what's alleged to have happened here. It's important, its implications are serious, and just because it's, the unknown and touches on the UFO subject is no reason to shy away from it. Where other people say, oh, it's flying saucers and little green men, and the world is making fun of us behind our backs. But I've worked again with a number of these communities and continue to right now, including one in an upcoming event in Henderson, Arizona, that I've been helping to develop with Travis Walton and a small cadre of people. We're going to have our first Skyfire conference in Arizona the first weekend in November. A conference later this month, the New England UFO Conference, which will take place in Leominster, Massachusetts. A conference I worked on helping to develop last month at the beginning of September, called the Experiencers Speak Conference in Portland, Maine. The economy's in rough shape. People are more open-minded than less. If a community can create an event to mark a UFO event that it actually legitimately is attached to, that can help educate people, as far as kids are concerned, maybe entertain them a bit in the context of the subject,
right.
And have a weekend on their calendar every year where folks will come to town and help their local economy by going to the restaurants and staying in the hotels and things as they go to this annual UFO conference. I'm all for it. And so I'm continuing to work in that area as much. You cited a friend and colleague earlier, Grant Cameron, who, has shifted gears dramatically in the last few years from his work that he began with and was best known for, namely UFOs and the United States presidents, to more UFOs and intelligence. He's, going another way with his work. But right now I'm taking a fairly conservative approach to where I can be of the most value. And as far as the abduction phenomena goes, people that have been through these things know that they can contact me. I'll do my best to get back to them. I often don't know the answers to their questions, but I do my best where possible to refer them to somebody in their area where possible who may be of value and assistance to them.
To help point them in the right direction. Peter, we've got a couple minutes left. I can't believe 2 hours flew by. Just want you to touch base. Our friend Bill sent a question in and said, can you just give us some thoughts on the Montauk Project Camp Hero?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another one that I put in the same category as the so-called Philadelphia experiments. The Montauk Project, the Montauk experiment, alleges to be an ongoing government operation going back to the 50s, possibly the 40s, that any number of books have been written about, papers given, once again with respect to the good people who are really involved in that area of research. I have never found anything to fully make the story completely credible for myself. I have no doubt that something happened out in Montauk, which is way at the eastern tip of Long Island, and in an area that I don't know if it's still a commissioned military area, but certainly back then was a base with some level of classification. What happened there, I don't know, but I've heard a lot of claims over the years and read a lot of claims over the years that I find very dramatic and quite theatrical and not grounded in anything other than an oral tradition. Again, who am I to say that means it didn't happen? I can't. But for me, I can't really comment on it more than that because I don't know, and I've never seen that much that has given me cause to feel that this is any more real than the so-called Eisenhower Treaty of 1954 with the aliens, which I find nonsensical.
Exactly. Peter, where can people get your books at?
Left at Eastgate can be picked up from any online book source, or from the publisher, Cosmo Press. The updated, expanded edition is published by them and is the one to get. And I have a new book out since August, which I was compelled to write, not one that I wanted to write. I felt it was so important, though, and did not want anyone looking at me even cross-eyed suggesting that I did it for money, that I did it in an online edition that I have made available at no cost to readers around the world, and I believe more than 50,000 people have downloaded the book since August. It is 450 pages, most of which is a huge database on Rendlesham, the largest one that's ever been made public. The book is called Deliberate Deception, a Case of Disinformation in the UFO Research Community. And any of your listeners and yourself, Pat, can get a free copy by going to the website of Phenomena Magazine. That's Phenomena Magazine. They're located in Manchester, UK. You go right to their website and you will see a box that says Special Reports. Click on it and you'll see 7 book icons. Download them in order, and you've got the whole 450-page book.
I'll have to go take a look at it. Peter, thank you so much for being here tonight and giving up a couple hours on your Saturday night. I know we just scratched the surface, and I would hope that when you have a little free time, maybe after the first of the year, we get you back on again.
Pat, I'd be honored to come back on, and I've had a great time on the show. Thank you and your listeners for your great questions, for your support, and be well, my friend, and I will look forward to returning the show in future.
Sounds good, Peter. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Good night.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.